was the battle, March 6, 1836. The defenders gallantly gave their lives in defense of Texas liberty at that battle, the Texian and Tejano defenders. Of course, the victory at San Jacinto changes the equation. Texas is an independent country. Santa Anna, on his way out, tore down as much of the Alamo as he could. So the walls that were around that compound, that 1.893 acres that was the battlefield, those walls were torn down. And ever since then, the Alamo has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, even as its legend deservedly grew in Texas and in American and in world history. It's been this strange sort of crossing of history this way, because the Alamo story grows and grows and grows. The John Wayne film in 1960, all the research that was done over the first parts and throughout the 20th century, the story of the Alamo gets bigger and bigger. The fact of the Alamo gets smaller and smaller. The city has encroached on it. The city actually lives now on its footprint. So what we're looking at, if you go to the Alamo now, this is what you see.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
The only two structures that survive are the church you see in front of you, and then the long barrack off to the left-hand side. And as we turn around, we see this is the Emily Morgan Hotel here. This is the Hipólito Garcia Federal Building here. There's a federal courthouse and some national security implicated agencies in there, if you catch my drift. There's the Hotel Indigo there. These are the Woolworth Palace and Crockett buildings, going basically right to left on that. You go around here, there's a Ripley's, and by the way, there's a Guinness World Record Museum here and a Ripley's in here. They're night and day barking at people who are trying to walk the battlefield, trying to understand what's going on at the Alamo. They're saying, hey, come in here, ride our rides. Hey, come in here, look at the, the world's longest fingernail guy. All kinds of stuff that doesn't belong on a sacred battlefield. You go around here, this is another Ripley's where there's a knife juggler. You go around here, there's just nothing but empty space. You go around here, more empty space, and then back in there is the arcade that was built in the 30s, and then Alamo Hall and the Alamo Annex where the Bowie exhibit are now. Now, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually go back and look at what the Alamo looked like in 1836? Most battlefields you can do that. How many of you here have been to Gettysburg? Good. Gettysburg's an amazing battlefield. 6,000 acres. Gettysburg is a 6,000 acre battlefield that has been handled respectfully. It has been handled properly, and it's been handled well. How many of you have been to Fort McHenry, Baltimore? What's it famous for? Star-Spangled Banner, exactly right. Francis Scott Key was captured by the British. He was on a ship offshore when the British were bombarding that fort, which guarded the Baltimore harbor. Baltimore, of course, at that time was a much more strategically vital city than you might think of it today. It was one of the big cities, one of the major cities in the United States. And Francis Scott Key penned the Star-Spangled Banner while he was offshore. If you go to Fort McHenry, you can tell what happened at Fort McHenry. It's a star-shaped fort typical of that time. You can tell there was a battle there. You can walk around. You can sort of relive what happened there. They even have a great movie that plays there that talks about the writing of the Star-Spangled Banner and the battle in the War of 1812, during which it was written. Actually written in 1814. That was a war that went on for a while. The Alamo is a different story, and that is unfortunate. It's a different story for two reasons. First, because Santa Anna tore the walls down out of a fit of rage that he lost Texas, and because he planned to reinvade. And did he do that? Yeah, he reinvaded twice, 1839 and 1842, and he lost both times. And then there was the Mexican-American War after that. So that's the first thing that happened to the Alamo's walls, is of course they were damaged in the battle. Then they were torn down by Santa Anna. Then the city actually grew up around the Alamo organically and encroached on that footprint. The Alamo, and I think everyone's opinion in this room, has not been treated respectfully over the years. It has not been treated properly. Let's go back in time though, and look at what the Alamo might have looked like if we stood on this exact spot. Now, what I'm about to show you, by the way, this transition and this visualization is brand new. We're still working on it at the General Land Office. What we want to be able to do is show people what it is that we've lost, so that we can then transition to what it is we're trying to regain. So if we were to be able to stand on this spot in 1836, this is what we would see. Welcome to the Alamo battlefield. Welcome to 1836. You can see a lot of differences. You can see the long barrack was a two-story structure at that time. You can see the Alamo Church did not have that iconic bell shape on the front of it. Who knows when that was added?
1849.
Yep. Very good. U.S. Army, They sent a unit down. Do you know which unit it was? Quincy Rifle. They were sent down from Illinois. They came down in 1846. They actually started construction on that in 1848. They added that parapet on top, or that bell shape on top of the church. They also cleaned out the Alamo church itself. For the first time in 10 years since the battle, they were ordered to turn the Alamo into a garrison, because the thought was that they were going to occupy that area. They were going to civilize more or less San Antonio, which was a pretty wild west town at that point. And then they were going to move into Mexico once that war started, because that war had already started to brew. So this unit from Quincy, Illinois, the Quincy Riflemen, came in, and they found something. I was doing some research just a few weeks ago, and they found something that startled me, and I started asking questions of our historian about it, and there aren't good records on what happened next. Because they were told to go into the Alamo church and the long barrack, clean them out, and then convert them into a proper garrison for this unit. When they went into the Alamo church, according to Everett, who was their clerk at the time and the illustrator, who drew a lot of, you've probably seen some of his drawings and illustrations of the Alamo from this period, he says that they found relics from the battle. They'd been in there 10 years. Now, what did he mean by that? He doesn't really describe it. He uses two words. He says relics, and he says skeletons that they found from the battle. And there's no records on what they did with that. So one of the things I'm trying to track down now is what happened to those things. Yeah?
Would this be the view before or after the battle, or at least after Santa Ana portion of the battle?
This would be the view day of. I'll spin around and show you what I mean by that. Let's turn on some historical markers. They're hard to read in this light. That is where Davy Crockett stood. That's the palisade. That is what he defended. You go around, this is the main gate, the south gate, through which people would come and go. Bowie was thought to have been in a room right over here. Of course, he was sick during the battle, but he was thought to have been in a room right by the gate, guarding the gate. Over here is the 18-pounder position. When Santa Ana demanded surrender, how did Travis answer him? Good. Single cannon shot, right at him. That was fired from that 18-pounder position right there. Beyond that, you find San Fernando Cathedral. That's where Santa Ana flew the red flag demanding surrender or die. The Mexican army during the battle breached these two spots here, among others, but on the south side, that's where they breached. Over here would have been Travis's headquarters. Over here would have been where Travis fell. Right at the very beginning of the battle, he was standing next to a cannon position and took a shot right to the head and fell. Over here is another cannon placement, and then you come around here, the convento, or long barrack as it's called, and then back to the Alamo church. Now, it's hard to see that and then see the present day Alamo at the same time, but we can actually, through this visualization, do that with a little ghosting effect here. Stop about right here. You can see we have a battlefield tour happening here in the present day, but we have the ghost of the long barrack sticking up over here. We have the Alamo church with its parapet now, because that was added. But over here, look how much we've lost. We've lost everything. In my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, this loss makes the Alamo a Texas tragedy. This loss makes the Alamo the most confusing battlefield on earth, of the battlefields that survive at all. Many, of course, have been subsumed in construction and development, what have you. This battlefield, I was actually walking this battlefield with an Alamo Defender descendant just a few weeks ago. I wanted to show her where the South Gate was. I wanted to show her where Bowie was. You can't really do that with this battlefield, as it stands in the present day. And this is a tragedy. As we go around the side, that 18-pounder position, I'm going to show you a photo in a few minutes of what's there now. And I hope you're as appalled as I am to see what is there now.
How far back did all this start going down?
The destruction?
Yeah.
It started first on March 7th, 1836, essentially. The battle was on March 6, 1836. That day and the day following, Santa Ana ordered the defenders' corpses burned outside the compound. He left a troop of about 1,000 to occupy the Alamo, and they stayed there through San Jacinto. After the Battle of San Jacinto, with his surrender, among the conditions of his surrender was he had to leave, he had to get out of Texas. He had to recognize Texas as a country, and he had to get all his troops out. He still had several thousand troops in Texas. The 1,000 that he still had occupying the Alamo, he ordered to tear down the walls. So that's the first moment when the walls begin to go away, is when he orders them torn down. But then the city, over time, just grew up around it in a very organic way. There's no group that's, I mean, it'd be great to say this mayor is responsible, or that person is responsible, or this group is responsible. The fact is, the Alamo was founded originally in 1718 to found a great city, among other things. And it succeeded. San Antonio is the second largest city in our state now. It is the military hub of the American Southwest. It's a great city. Unfortunately, it's encroached a little too much on its most sacred spot. It's sort of coalesced around its heart too much. And so we need to recapture what we've lost. Does this look like a battlefield? I mean, if you look at the present day, does this look like a battlefield at all? No.
Well, why don't you just condemn it all and just redo it, make a park out of it? Well, no, I'm not
that's a good
joking,
question.
because that's where you're headed, is to set up a kind of a Disneyland, wait, let me finish. You're trying to recreate the battlefield. You like to get as much of that as you can, get the street out of there, get the people out of there. Let me tell you what my beef is, because I've got a beef, and I don't usually do public stuff, but I'm going to today. The issue is not whether you get your perfect recreation of the battlefield back. It may be your issue. If you wanted this, you could show the entire history out of the book. You know I'm citing. They've got about a 40-page book that gives a colored overview of everything in the Alamo from 1690, whenever it was built, all the way to right now. And the city's been growing there and intersecting with the Alamo forever. I mean, Alamo's just sitting in the middle of a big city. They had streets and cross streets and horses going through in 1870 and 1910 or whatever. The issue is whether Texas owns the Alamo and controls the Alamo, or whether you guys at the GLO have given away the control of it to a multinational, kind of multifunctional Soros, God knows who, and that the people of Texas no longer control it and can't do whatever with it. And that's the issue. So it's not whether you get your park or you recreate your battlefield. It's really who owns it, who controls it, and what's going on. That's the issue, and that's what you need to answer today if you're going to answer it. That's the problem.
I'll answer it right now. Where we're standing in this visualization is city property. Where we're looking forward at that curve, you see that little red curve there, that's state property. That's one of the issues we actually have to address. Now, the idea of, or the question about condemning the land and grabbing it that way,
And moving the cemetery.
yeah. I'll get to that in a little bit too. The first issue, though, is the land office does not have eminent domain. That is not a power our agency has. That is not a power we want. And I will state as a conservative, I don't want that power, because even if we used it properly here, somebody down the line is going to use it improperly somewhere else.
Okay, but I'm just concerned about whether it's under the control of Texas.
It is.
Or,
in fact,
well, I'm not sure that's
well, it is, because there's an elected position that is in charge of managing the Alamo, and that is Land Commission.
I'm concerned with the multifunctional, multi-organizational control that's behind all that. As far as I understand it, there's just lots of foundations, and a piece for the San Antonio and a piece for this set of piece. Okay, the UN World Heritage designation is the problem. That's the problem.
That is what.
Once you come under the management or the hand, if the UN World Heritage folks and all the folks that are behind those folks have any say, I'm not saying substantial say, any say, you got a problem.
Do you know how much say they have down there?
More than I think anybody in Texas would want.
Zero. That's
Yeah,
how much say they have there.
We'll see.
Let me explain the UNESCO World Heritage designation, how it started, and what it means.
Yeah, what it means and what it
It
does.
started 10 years ago. The city of San Antonio wanted to become a World Heritage Site. They have 5 missions that were built during the Spanish colonial period that they designated as their World Heritage Site.
And why?
And
Why did they want that to happen?
What strictures,
George?
what controls?
Tourism. They wanted it for tourism because the World Heritage designation puts those missions on a list of the top sites around the world people can visit to learn about history. Other sites that are included on that are the Statue of Liberty, Independence Hall,
Yeah, I want it for Texas.
Monticello.
I want it for Texas.
Yeah, well, it is for Texas. But this
I
is,
don't think so.
I'm just explaining the history here to you. UNESCO World Heritage designation started 10 years ago. We were not in office 10 years ago at the land office.
The
We
GLO
weren't there.
existed then.
But the GLO wasn't even managing the Alamo.
Right, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas were managed.
And they supported this too, by the way.
Yeah,
But
well,
they did. They did.
Yeah, I know.
And when Commissioner Patterson comes in as the custodian of the Alamo in 2011, that's when the legislature handed it to the land office. And Governor Perry signed the bill that handed it over to the land office. Patterson actually supported the UNESCO designation himself. We have a letter posted on SavingTheAlamo.com in which he strongly supports it. Now, so that is the origins of it. It was finalized about 5-6 months into our time at the land office. after years and years and years of this, seeking this designation on the part of the city of San Antonio primarily. What it actually means to the day-to-day management, the direction of the Alamo, is zero. It means nothing
For the day-to-day.
for anything.
Well, just a minute.
And I actually checked with our lawyers on this. If it ever became, and I checked with the lawyers just like a week ago, if it ever became an issue, which it's not going to, but if it ever became an issue, we could just pull out.
We've already pulled out, haven't we?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
President
not-
Trump actually formally pulled us out of UNESCO. That doesn't change anything for this particular designation.
Okay, I've been,
We're-
the United Nations and UNESCO,
Yes.
on their sites, I've looked at, and there's a San Antonio mission sites, this is what they say. And I'll back up to even begin, have you ever heard of Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030?
Yeah, I've heard of all
And
that.
so you know what their sustainable goals are? Eliminate
Yeah.
private property, tackle climate change, no one left behind, sustainable development. Okay, so the San Antonio mission site, what it says is consideration of becoming a World Heritage Site was based on its water distribution system and to illustrate the Spanish Crown's objectives for its missions on the frontiers of the empire, thereby telling the story of Spanish colonial mission life. No mention of the Battle of Alamo, Texas.
Because we're talking about 5 missions, not 1.
This one's becoming a site. The next one is from the same organization, the San Antonio Missions. It says one notable change that did take place. Mexico, and this is from obtaining this Mission Vallejo, which is what they call it, on all these sites. That Mexico achieved its independence from Spain in 1821, and the soldiers of the Alamo Company swore allegiance to the newly formed nation of Mexico and its federal constitution of 1824. No mention of the Battle of the Alamo or significance
Well,
to
that happened
Texas or
yet.
to U.S. No, these are the things that went into the experts considering whether it should become a World Heritage Site. Okay, then another one. I mean, nothing in their consideration addressed the Alamo and the Battle of the Alamo. So I question why this group would want that kind of tourism. Now, UNESCO, what it works for, and they're the ones in charge of the World Heritage Sites, UNESCO works to create the conditions for dialogue among civilizations, cultures, and peoples based upon respect for commonly shared values. It is through this dialogue that the world can achieve global visions of sustainable development. Again, no mention of the Alamo. This is a goal from UNESCO. Another one, when it talks about Mission Vallejo, not the Alamo, it says it contributes an important element to the series as the foundation of the San Antonio missions, the first one to be created by the Franciscan order and the first enclave that acted as a pole of attraction to the rest of the Franciscan order and the first enclave. No mention of the Alamo, Texas, or the United States. The stated goal of UNESCO is for education for sustainable development and global citizenship. By 2030, to ensure all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture and peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. And they also have sites that they took over that they list in Palestine, like the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Jerusalem. And in the statement from the first developer, that guy from Philadelphia, they used the term cultural diversity. This is what they want. So no matter how hard you personally or GLO tries to stop it, this is why they took it over. This
They didn't
is
take
their
anything
goal.
over, is what I'm telling you. They
Well,
didn't take anything
Well,
over.
they're involved in it.
It is a designation on a website.
You
That's
say
all.
they didn't take it over.
That-
You know all
yeah,
this.
they're every
Wait.
month.
You know all this hate speech stuff we have now?
Yeah.
Do you know how long that was a UN resolution? that Hillary tried to get passed, and instead of using the UN resolution that we couldn't, their Senate wouldn't pass, they went round and about and got to the people. So they implement it without going through a government. The same thing with the education system. We don't take on their education, they come up with Common Core. They do all this roundabout. They want to take our guns away to the Small Arms Treaty. So yeah, I know you say they don't, but they have a way through the other party and all those organizations to take over everything. They're promoting Marxism, communism, socialism, everything to take everything away from us.
Yeah. I don't have any argument against that, because it's mostly true.
Well, this is all from their website. This is all factual.
But my argument is, they have no say at the Alamo. The designation was something the city of San Antonio sought, that the previous land commissioner supported, that we're kind of stuck with now.
We should.
If it puts it on a website.
Is there any way to get out of
We're
that?
kind of stuck with it.
There is, and well, we're stuck with it for now, for a number of reasons. We are working with the city of San Antonio to get as far as we can in this process together. The city of San Antonio recognizes that the Alamo is the heart of their city. They recognize that the Alamo has not been treated respectfully in the past. And what I mean by that, let's go forward a little bit.
Well, have you talked to, was it Robert Trevino on the city council?
Oh, yeah.
He wants cultural diversity. That's why he wants it. There are people there that wants it to happen. They want to diminish what it means. That's their
The city of San
intent.
Antonio is not necessarily a friend in this problem for Texas. It may be part of the other side. So, because it's got a lot of multiple, diverse, everybody piles of lots of different people, each with their ideologic bent and so on, including, well.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to speak for them I'm not here to speak on political issues at all.
Well, you need to.
Well,
You need
Man
to.
finished, she hadn't been able to complete a sentence in 15 minutes.
yeah. I thought I was going to speak.
They've got
Thank you.
things to answer for.
This is
And I'll
why I
answer.
invited him.
I will answer if you give me a chance. So if we were able to go back to 1836, we did the ground view, here would be a high view, okay? If they had Google Earth back then, if you had a drone back then, this is more or less what you would have seen. This model, by the way, you may have seen this model online recently. A gentleman by the name of James Body is a retired engineer at Bell Labs, lives in Georgia. He's been building this model for 8 years. This model is so accurate that I put it to our historian, Dr. Bruce Wenders, and by the way, a good conservative guy too. You know how hard it is to find a conservative historian? We have one of the 5 in the country. His only quibble was there was too much grass inside the compound. The actual model itself is completely accurate. Now, moving forward, I already did that. This is a schematic view to show you one of the problems that we're trying to solve. You can see the Alamo Church there, the arcade, the Long Barrack, the cenotaph, and you can also see the battlefield, the lunette, and the buildings and so forth. You can see that the west wall is cut right through by several buildings. You can see the Hippolyto Garcia building, which is up on the sort of upper left. The north wall cuts right through that, or would if it still existed. That red street, or that pink street, is highlighted for a reason. That endangers the Alamo right now. Every single day, that street, the traffic running on that street, is a real threat, a present threat to the Alamo. And I'll get to that in a second. Because the vibrations. Stealing my thunder. What we have lost at the Alamo is, as I said before, a Texas tragedy. This is a superimposition of that same model over the city today using a Google Earth view. The black lines, the black parts of it are what we have lost, or the 1836 structure. The entire battlefield is paved over by one thing or another. As I said, the city has just basically encroached on it. Now, a lot of folks have suggested that we use that federal building that's up in the upper right for the museum. How many of you have ever walked into a federal building and made them an offer to buy it? We have been talking with them for 2.5 years about the use of that building for the museum for the Alamo, and the fact is it's a non-starter for 2 reasons. One of those is there is a federal courthouse in there, and they would have to relocate that federal courthouse, and the federal government, the GSA, doesn't have any plans to do that at this point. The other reason is there are national security implicated agencies in there, if you catch my drift, who don't want to move because they have things in there they need to keep in there. So we have those 2 sort of immovable objects to deal with on that particular building. We have been, just so you all know, talking with our congressional delegation. Both senators are involved. Most of the Congress folks that we have are involved on both sides of the aisle because they recognize that the Alamo is the heart of Texas.
Involved in trying to do what?
Involved in trying to dislodge the federal government in some way from that building.
You know, in McVeigh's had business.
Hmm?
In McVeigh's had business.
I'm not even gonna go there. That would be too much of a renovation. It would be a great spot for the museum, but the fact is, it's a non-starter, and we're on the clock. How many of you are familiar with the Phil Collins donation, the Phil Collins collection? In 2014, and the Phil Collins we're talking about is the same Phil Collins who wrote Susudio, the drummer for Genesis, that guy. He came to the Alamo in 2014 and sort of revealed himself as one of the Alamo's strongest supporters in the world. He has been collecting Alamo artifacts for most of his life. And as a rock star, he was able to collect a lot. I've seen some of this collection. I have not seen all of this collection. The pieces I have seen are mind-blowing. They are some of the best Alamo artifacts that exist. We have them now because he donated them in 2014, but he donated them with a stipulation, with a condition. And it's a good condition. The condition is you got to build the Alamo Museum so we can house these artifacts. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So we're working on that. That's actually one of the big planks of our plan, is to build the Alamo the museum that it deserves. Anyway, so here we see what the Alamo should be, but what we've lost. Now moving forward, earlier I mentioned that 18-pounder position from which Travis answered Santa Ana's demand for surrender. This is what's there now. I took this picture myself about a month ago as I was walking up this sidewalk. It's on the west side of Alamo Street. You see that little sign down in the lower right, it says the Alamo and it briefly describes the battle. Right next to that is a knife juggler. And he is standing there juggling his knives and calling on you to come in, and instead of paying attention to the Alamo and showing any reverence to the defenders, he's there barking at you to come in and watch his knife juggling out. I put a question on that slide that I asked all of you, is that acceptable? No. Yeah, it's not acceptable. This is what happens on Alamo Plaza on any given day. A little bit hard to see in this room. Down in the lower row toward the right, the second one from the right, that's a fellow that's called the Naked Stick Pony Guy.
Oh, God.
He runs around in his underwear riding a stick pony on Alamo Plaza. Alamo Plaza, as I've shown, is the battlefield. That is where the defenders bled and died for us. Is this acceptable?
It's not acceptable anywhere. How does he get away with it?
He gets away with it because that is Alamo Plaza, and that is the currently designated free speech zone.
That's
Now,
not free speech, that's indecent exposure.
well, I would agree with you. And what has been seen cannot be unseen, so I apologize for putting that up there. But it does illustrate the point, which is we have this problem. Now, I don't know about your opinion of free speech zones. My opinion, the whole country is a free speech zone. And cities can't designate that, and college campuses can't designate that. It's ridiculous to say that you have a restricted free speech zone that's this big when the whole country is covered by the First Amendment.
But they are and they do, and I
I
say
know.
that goes back to the United Nations.
Well, it goes back to what a lot of leftists want to do, candidly. We're going to move this free speech zone off of the battlefield.
Good.
That is one of our big purposes here, is to get this nonsense and this noise, this irreverent garbage off of the battlefield.
How do you do that?
Well, we're working with the city on that, actually. What we have to do, you're kind of jumping ahead of me there, but that's fine. What we have to do, right now, the Alamo is is owned by the state. The plaza and the street are owned by the city. The battlefield is detached from the Alamo itself. It's been this way for 100 years. We're going to fix that. We're going to unify them under one management, close that street down, and get rid of this nonsense. We're going to get back to 1836. This has never been acceptable, I think, to any Texas patriot. Why it was allowed to happen, I'm not going to point fingers, but it shouldn't have.
Why is he doing the stick pony deal? Is it?
Because it's crazy. I mean, if I was to try to figure out what he's trying to protest, I'd probably spend all day and get nowhere. You've probably heard about the master plan. We've been discussing bits and pieces of it here already. So just to lay out some markers here at this point, the first one is the UN has no influence at the Alamo, never will. We answered this question 2 years ago. Definitively, it ain't going to happen. When President Trump pulled out of UNESCO earlier in October, we were one of the first to come out strongly supporting him on that. As in Commissioner Bush himself on the record saying this is good. We don't like UNESCO, we don't like the UN. In fact, in my own career, I've written articles in which I've argued that the US should get out of the UN and set up our own organization of democracy so that we can compete with the UN and ultimately get rid of it.
Is there any place, did Bush say that publicly so we can go look it
Yeah,
up?
he did. It ain't gonna happen. You can look that phrase up
Okay.
from July 2015. It was in the San Antonio Express News, among other newspapers. It was it went
You have to
statewide.
sign up for that one again.
Well,
Okay.
yes, you can find it. You can find it publicly. The UNESCO statement you can find on our website, the GLO website, and it also was in the media too. We were among the few to come out and say this is good. Now, this whole business of the name of the Alamo. When the Alamo was founded in 1718, it was founded as a mission, not a fortress. It was founded for 3 reasons, among, well, several reasons, but mainly 3. To bring Christianity to the New World, to be the tip of the spear against the French Empire, because we had imperial politics happening between Spain and France and Texas at that point, and to found a great city. And so they founded 5 missions, of which the Alamo was one, to do all of those tasks. However, who can tell me where the Alamo gets the Alamo name? Pardon?
Is it
It's backward. Yeah.
that Alamo company?
Alamo de Paras.
They were talking
Yes.
about.
There was a company that was sent from what was then Spain, now Mexico, called the Alamo de Paras Flying Company. They were called that because that's where they were from, Alamo de Paras. So when they moved into the Alamo in the 1803 time frame, the Alamo took on that name, took on the name of the unit, and has been called the Alamo since 1803. So by the time we get to the battle in 1836, it's already been called the Alamo for 33 years. And there has never been any suggestion, any plan, plot, scheme. They can still thrive. These are businesses that provide jobs. And as conservatives, we ought to be on board with that. They provide jobs, they bring a little bit of money into the San Antonio and therefore Texas economy. You would expect a city the size of San Antonio to have attractions like these. What you do not expect is for them to be sitting on a battlefield. And if they were sitting on Gettysburg, we would all be up in arms. If they were sitting, if we had a Ripley's franchise, or any of these franchises, I don't want to single them out, at Fort McHenry, we'd all be up in arms about it. It's been allowed to happen at the Alamo over the years, and we're changing that. So these businesses are there. They understand, by the way, we've had conversations with their owners. They understand where we're coming from, we understand where they're coming from. This is, it's not easy. Everything with the Alamo, I think Kathy mentioned my background working at NASA before. When you work on something like the Hubble telescope, you do very complicated things. I had no idea what complicated meant until I got to the Alamo, because everything working on the Alamo is about 10 times as complicated as you think it's going to be. This is one of those. We bought those buildings in 2015 for the purpose of putting this museum in there and putting some Alamo staff space in there, because candidly they don't have enough space to run the Alamo at this point. There are 100 staffers that it takes to run the Alamo, and they just haven't had adequate space. The museum primarily is going to be going in there. Those businesses have to be going. So we're working with them to relocate them so that there will be an entertainment district that is close to the Alamo but not on the footprint, so that those businesses can thrive. Tourists can still come and spend dollars in San Antonio, but the Alamo battlefield is a battlefield again.
We're also dealing with a lot of emotion. And that's
Yes.
never logical.
Well, yeah, there's nothing like the Alamo anywhere else, in Texas or anywhere else. There are a lot of superheroes movies coming out these days, the Avengers and Batman and all that stuff. Every superhero has an origin story, right? Superman came from Krypton, the last of his race, or so they thought when they sent him up. Batman, Spider-Man, they all have origin stories. For Texas, the Alamo's our origin story. This is where we start. This is what our Texanness means. It's where our identity comes from. It's this identity of sacrificing everything for freedom, fighting for what we believe in, even against impossible odds, ultimately winning. There are other battles that are similar to the Alamo in history. You think of Masada in Israel, for instance, where they stood up against the Romans and fought and lost. The difference with the Alamo is we won. San Jacinto, we won the battle. But this is our origin story. And all of the history, I know there's that 10,000 years of history quote that's out there from Dr. Skarmas, that we can't pinpoint one moment in time. Those are a couple of quotes he said. There are other quotes where he has said, and people don't quote these quotes because they're not convenient to their story. They don't quote where he says the Alamo is the most important battle in American history. They don't quote where he says that all of the history of Texas revolves around the Alamo, because it does. The master plan, by the way, we've been accused of trying to turn the Alamo into a theme park. That's the opposite of what we're doing. We're taking those businesses, those operations that are consistent with 1836 and moving them. Today, if you walk around down there, you're going to have somebody trying to sell you snow cones. You're going to have carnival barkers, and you may have PETA protesters, and just all kinds of stuff that doesn't belong there. All of that is going away if this plan succeeds. Now, I know you're going to ask about Reimagine the Alamo. That's the last point on this page right here. Reimagine, not my favorite word. I would have preferred to use reinforcing. But reimagine isn't about rewriting history. It's about when you stand on that battlefield today, imagining that you see a battlefield again. Imagining that you see more 1836. Imagining that you see the museum that the Alamo has, or doesn't have, but deserves. That's what that was about. Rewriting history has never been a part of this project.
Who's in charge? Sorry.
Mr. Bush,
Question then, why don't you get rid of that word reimagine?
we did. It's out of the branding now. It's gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about retake?
I like reinforce. Retake is good too. Reinforce is good because we're actually going to tell the story better than we've been telling it in years past. And we're actually preserving the Alamo. I'm going to get to that in a second. We talked about the street and the danger that it poses. Just to give you guys a little bit of a timeline, I don't want to dwell on this much, but you can find in the legislative record legislation going back as far as '93, seeking to change Alamo management, doing different things with it. The UNESCO designation starts in 2012. The Alamo endowment we've been hit for started in 2012. All that stuff. Now, that street, that pink street that we highlighted earlier, this is what that street does. That street is far too close to the Alamo, and it allows buses and large trucks and things like that to drive basically right in front of it. And as you mentioned, what they do is they create vibrations that go through the ground. They rattle that church. Now, that church was not built to last 300 years. It was built in a frontier circumstance, using the materials they had at hand, which were rocks and mud, essentially, and sticks. And they built it over a succession of years, about 8 or 9 masons working on it, after the first one collapsed. This is actually the second church that was built there. The first one collapsed in the 1740s, and this one was started in the 1750s. But the street being so close to it, combined with the materials that it's made out of, combined with the stresses that it's already been under for 181 years since the battle, meaning that you see that little dusty section on the black right down there? That is 1 day's worth of crumbling at the Alamo. And there are more than just that. What we did for 1 day in 2016, we had heard anecdotally from the staff at the Alamo that every morning they have to come in and sweep out dust and little chunks, little pieces of wood and rock. Yes?
Where is the mass graves located at? Where
There is no mass grave. They were burned. They were burned. Here's another shot. This is inside the church again. You see those little dusty sections? It's hard to see in the slide. You see those little dusty sections?
Even the Mexican soldiers?
No, the Mexican soldiers were mostly dumped in the river. Actually, yeah.
But you know where, but tell them where the bones are though.
The bones?
Bones, yeah.
Well, there
Just
are.
the bones they collect.
You're talking about the ones in San Fernando?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's debate over whether those are actual bones of the defenders or not.
Understood.
One Seguin was, of course, the last man to leave the Alamo alive. He left taking Travis's letter calling for reinforcements. When he comes back, varying accounts, May, June 1836 or early 1837, by then, of course, everything has changed. Texas is a country. The Mexican army is gone, and the defenders had been burned. They were burned the day of the battle and the day after. They were burned at sites about a 5-minute walk south of the Alamo, and at a site about 5 or 10 minutes east. The records on that last site are not good. We don't know where that was. The other two we know in general where they were. Not, you can't pinpoint, but you can locate them pretty well. The bones that Seguin, there's a story that he collected bones that they were put in a box. It was engraved with the names Travis Crockett Bowie on the inside. That box was given a funeral procession through the city of San Antonio and then buried in San Fernando Cathedral. There's a competing story that they were buried in a cemetery nearby. So there's two different stories. There is a box at San Fernando Cathedral that does have bones in it. Those bones were found in an excavation actually 1970s, I would say, might have been earlier. But they were found in an excavation, and they were found to have been charred, and there were buttons with them too, indicating that they could possibly have been from the funeral pyres. There is a lot of debate over whose bones, over whether those are defender bones or not.
Have you guys actually tracked down the timeline of when the battlefield basically became something else. Yeah, at what point in San Antonio, the city of San Antonio's history, did this stuff start to, and it became basically acceptable, and it was?
After the Army leaves it in the 1870s, is really when it starts to become part of the city, and the city encroaches around it. And you can find historic photos. For instance, there was a bar called the Alamo Bar that was erected right next to the church that sold 5-cent cigars. There was a grocery store that came in and bought the Long Barrack and turned it into part of a grocery store for a while. And there are actually photos showing this 2-story monstrosity of a grocery store that had been just basically plopped down on top of the Long Barrack. It was mistreated for years and years and years. And really, you get to the 1880s, early 1900s, and the Daughters of the Republic of Texas save it. And then we get this back and forth between buildings that are already built. Samuel Maverick built some of those buildings that we bought, for instance, the Crockett Building. You get the federal government coming in and plopping themselves down. What the city didn't do is they didn't really demark where the battlefield was very well. And that just allowed too much development to encroach on the battlefield.
But I guess they purchased the land or something. There must have been some ownership where they would have figured out what, you know, I guess, you know.
Yeah. Well, the city, the city ran a street through there, and they put the plaza there.
They didn't think,
Silly type of building.
they just didn't think.
Preservation was not as important in earlier times as it is now. For instance, the Alamo itself, 10 years after the battle, no one did anything with it. It just sat there.